Today is August 26, 2023. I'm Alan Zundell, and this is Political Dharma. On today's episode, I'm once again covering the campaign of Dr. Cornel West seeking the nomination of the Green Party of the United States to the office of President of the United States. Last week, my show covered the potential for a unity ticket between Dr. West and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. if Kennedy should fail to get the nomination of the Democratic Party. Could they then join up as a team and campaign for the general election? That question was raised by Sabi Sabs on her video channel last week, a couple weeks ago, and I talked about it last week. But this week, she actually interviewed Dr. West, and we'll get his take on this, his answer to the question of whether he's thinking about teaming up with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And then I take a second look at the sore loser laws. Last week, I said that those would prevent Kennedy from getting on the Green Party ticket in the general election. One of my listeners, one of my viewers, challenged that assertion, said maybe those laws don't really apply to presidential elections. So I took a further look into that. I'm going to tell you today what I found. Then towards the end of the show, I'm going to be looking at an attack on Dr. West. There was a Daily Beast article that accused him of being over $500,000 in debt to the Internal Revenue Service of the United States. That is, he owed a lot of taxes, and they said child support. So Dr. West addressed this as well, and I'm going to have a clip from an interview he did with Tim Black on Tim Black TV on his YouTube channel, and then give you my take on it about what we should think about this accusation. All right, so let's get into it. Political Dharma. And first up, Sabi Sabs had Dr. West as a guest on her show again a couple of days ago, and she presented them with that viewer poll as to whether he should team up with RFK Jr. if Kennedy failed to get the Democratic nomination. Now, this poll was not a scientific poll. It was only the poll of her viewers on her live broadcast when she first raised this possibility, but she did bring it to the attention of Dr. West, and let's hear what he had to say about it.
What do you think about that? If RFK Jr. lost the primary, and let's say, he came around on the Israel and Palestine issue and changed his position a little bit on the reparations issue, could you see the two of you actually running together?
Well, I've never seen this poll before. I can tell you that, definitely. And it's true, the time that we spent together when he was focused on environmental racism and so on, and his precious sister Carrie and the whole family, that we had wonderful time and what have you. But it's just so premature on one hand, and the other hand, I don't know, a ticket West Kennedy, that kind of ebony ivory would be both interesting, but it just never occurred to me. You know what I mean? It just never occurred to me. It really, and of course it depends on which one's president, which one's vice president. So I was just talking to my dear sister Nina Turner, who I love so deeply, and good God Almighty, just the idea of her being vice presidential material is high cotton in so many ways. But I know she's in a situation now where it's impossible. But I haven't thought about vice president. Now, of course, if he said, well, I would be the vice president, he'd be the president. I said, well, wait. Mick Jagger can't be with James Brown. I thought Mick Jagger got to be VP to James Brown. How we going to work this out, my brother? Let's go have a drink. But no, he's always my brother, even though a lot of people think that he's out there in a lot of different ways. I think he's got a decent heart. He's got a lot of goldenness in him. But I've never seen that poll. And as you know, we just speculate and pontificate and kind of brainstorming in a loving and humorous way. But most importantly, for me, whatever is best for me to serve poor and working people. That's the only reason why I'm running.
So as you hear, he hadn't really given a lot of thought to teaming up with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he found it an interesting exercise in speculation. He said he was kind of excited about Nina Turner as a possible running mate, but that she was busy with something else, I think. But let's look now at the sore loser laws, because last week when I first made you aware of, or maybe I didn't first make you aware, but I first presented Savvy Sav's speculation about such a unity ticket. I said this would not happen because the sore loser laws would forbid, in most of the states in the United States, there's laws that would keep someone who had lost in a primary election for one of the major parties from being on the general election ballot as an independent or third-party candidate. I received a comment on that video from a viewer, Nordenham1234. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate people that present other information or challenge my views, because I've always hoped that this channel would be more of a back and forth with an audience. I'm only doing this as a sideline, as a part-time thing, so I can be wrong on stuff. I don't always do as deep of research as I would like to. So I'm really counting on a community of viewers to give me feedback, give me further information, set me on another trail. Anyway, be challenged whether those laws actually would apply to presidential candidates. So in order to check this out further, I did a search for Richard Winger. Now, Richard Winger is known as the publisher of Ballot Access News, which he's been publishing since 1985. Currently, it's in a purely online version, I believe. He's been following ballot access laws since he was in high school, which is earlier than I was in high school, and then publishing the Ballot Access News since 1985. So he's been following developments in ballot access very closely for a number of decades. And as it turns out, he wrote an article earlier this year. It was called "Why Sore Loser Laws Can't Be Applied to Presidential Candidates." It appeared in March 29 of this year, 2023, on the smerconish.com website. That's SMERCONISH. Michael Smerconish is the owner of that website, and he does a podcast and other things. He's a political commentator, but he did have an article from Richard Winger, on the subject of sore loser laws. And the upshot of it is he doesn't believe that those sore loser laws can legally apply to presidential elections. And he makes a number of good arguments. The most easy to explain would be, number one, that sore loser laws, as they apply to someone who lost in a primary election, well, in the states, a candidate for a presidential primary is not, if they don't get the most votes, they're not a loser. Those votes are simply translated into delegates to the national convention that then chooses the presidential nominee for the major party. So the candidate in a state is not a loser. They may fail to get any delegates, but that's not the same thing as losing the nomination in that particular state's election. That's one thing. Now, when you turn around and look at the general election, there's a problem here too, because the presidential candidate does not actually fill out any forms to be on the ballot in any of the states. This is something that they coordinate with electors. So it's really an election of electors in each state. Electors, of course, who are part of the electoral college that actually elects the president and vice president of the United States. So it's not that the candidate is the person seeking that state's electors. It's that those electors are seeking that state's election, electors who happen to be sworn to a particular presidential candidate. So fine points of law, but it's a persuasive case. Now, the only problem is that, as Winger says, sore loser laws have been around for over a century, and they hadn't really been applied to presidential candidates until 2012. And he remarks upon that it's unusual that it happened, but it's not strange to me at all, because in recent decades, Congress has been closely divided, and presidential elections have often been closely decided, so that each party is a little more nervous now than they had been in the past about potential spoiler races. And this is not only from the growth of the Green Party, but also the Libertarian Party, which worries Republicans on the other side of the political spectrum. So there's been challenges by both major parties towards independent and minor candidates that they fear may cause them to lose races, either at the higher levels of Congress or the presidential race. So there's been a lot of legal challenges since 2012 and conflicting court opinions. Now, Democrats in particular have been using challenges to ballot access against candidates of the Green Party. I know Jill Stein, when she ran for president in 2016, encountered a lot of resistance and a lot of attempts to throw her off the ballot in various states because they were worried about her presence on the ballot affecting the vote total for the Democratic candidate at the time, Hillary Clinton. So we know that the parties have become more aggressive in making challenges to ballot access, including for the presidential elections. So the deterrent I would see here for Kennedy becoming a candidate with Dr. West on the Green Party ticket, if he failed to make the presidential nomination in the Democratic Party, the challenge would be that they would be sure to encounter a lot of legal challenges. And those legal challenges can cost a lot of time and a lot of money, which would hinder a campaigns, particularly one like for the Green Party, where they don't have a lot of money they don't have a lot of time, and the legal expertise is not always as available, especially if you don't have money. So in short, it would cause them a lot of headaches to put Kennedy on their ticket. In a legal sense, they could get a lot of challenges. But I also go back to what I said last week, which is just that Kennedy has not shown any sign of interest in the Green Party ever, to my knowledge. And I think from the Green Party's perspective, he would not be the best fit either for a vice presidential candidate. Now, Dr. West has had closer ties with the Green Party, and he is making current efforts to help them out. I got an email from his campaign recently, I think one of the first fundraising emails I've seen from him. He's been kind of reticent about sending out donation requests, but this was specifically to help them get ballot access in Arizona, which is where the Green Party has been fighting for ballot access, one among a number of states. So he's taking efforts not just to boost his own campaign, but to help the Green Party to get access to the ballot for other candidates of the Green Party as well. So he's making that, he's strengthening his ties to the Green Party, something that Kennedy has never done. So I don't, for a number of reasons, I still don't think this is likely to happen. The candidate, the person that I think would be most likely to be a vice presidential pick for Cornel West is, drumroll, Jill Stein. Jill Stein was the presidential candidate of the Green Party in 2012 and 2016. She helped build the vote total from previous, when it fell down rapidly after Nader's 2000 run on the Green Party ballot line. And she helped rebuild the party with her 2 runs for the presidency. She is the one who won, along with her former vice presidential candidate, Juma Baraka. They got together and persuaded Dr. West to seek the Green Party ballot line. And she's currently his campaign manager. So I would think that she would be a likely pick for vice presidential on the ticket with Cornel West if he should get the nomination of the Green Party. She's a Green Party person. She's well known within the party. Her bona fides are there, or bona fides, or whatever the Latin is. And Dr. West has a relationship with her. I think she would be a good pick. We'll see what happens. So I think that's it on that topic. The potential unity ticket, don't think it's going to happen. I think Jill West would be a better pick all the way around. So let's turn now to our second topic, which is this attack on Cornel West based on his owing of back taxes to the IRS. Now, this first appeared on August 3rd in a Daily Beast article by William Brederman. I don't know much about the reporter, but the headline was Cornel West owes more than $500,000 in unpaid taxes. And in the article, he went on to say that public records in New Jersey and California show that Dr. West owes that much money to the IRS. Now, the framing of the article was that he is hypocritical because he's constantly calling for the 1%, the very wealthy, to pay more in taxes. As we know, they have relatively low tax rates for the amount of money they have. We're talking about billionaires, and at this time, people have tens of billions in income or even higher. He calls for higher taxes on them, yet he is not paying his own taxes. So that story quickly spread with the same type of framing that Dr. West is a hypocrite for calling for higher taxes at the same time he owes back taxes, and spread to ABC News, The New Republic, and several online news sources. And it took a couple of weeks for Dr. West to respond to these. Now, I first became aware of it in what as far as I know, is his first appearance to respond to these charges on Tim Black TV. So here's what Dr. West had in response to a question by Tim Black about this magazine article and these accusations.
So they say that you owe about $500,000 in taxes and in child support. Dr. West, what do you say to these critics and these people who are bringing up this issue?
Well, one is, child support's a lie. I've always put high priority on my kids. In fact, I've treated them in an even lavish way, because I've always believed that they had a priority beyond anything else. And so when it comes to that particular front, that's just not true. It's just a matter of it's not recorded, but it's not true. But when it comes to the taxes, that's definitely true. I've been broke as the Ten Commandments since 1984. I've had waves of audits, waves of levies, waves of liens, and then the liabilities and the fees build up. So you get in the black hole. And I've always been honest about that. Always been honest about that. I am exactly like 63% of hardworking citizens in America who live paycheck to paycheck with dignity and determination and say, hey, I got to do it. Now, my paycheck's bigger than everyday working people. There ain't no doubt about that. My paycheck is bigger, but then my debts are bigger. But I've never really been obsessed with money, man. I come from a tradition that says, seek ye first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added. So I've never denied that I was broke in that way. But I have my grievance with the IRS. I think people ought to pay their fair taxes, especially the 1%. Most of the 1% don't pay their fair taxes. But people ought to pay their fair taxes, including myself. But it's clear to me that you got folk who will find anything or manufacture anything in order to attack your character when you're trying to tell the truth and bear witness, especially on the chocolate side of town. They're going to find anything, no doubt. So that fine, let folk, pursue the truth in a fair way, but at the same time, let them know that I'm honest enough to acknowledge the degree to which, yes, I've been behind on taxes. Man, I've had a knock on my door on Christmas Eve in the 80s, 2 years in a row, with the IRS giving me a subpoena. Christmas Eve, in the cold. You know what I mean? I said, okay, that's what it is. I'm not naive. That's how things roll. Definitely. But at the same time, I actually was behind. And the liabilities and the fees build up, and you make an agreement and you continually pay and make sure you pay. And I think large numbers of people understand what I'm talking about. And that's always been the case. That's always been the case. I've never been into money making. That's not my thing.
All right. So all told, I think a pretty good response. He owned up to the fact that he owed taxes, but he also said he's on a payment plan to pay those back taxes. So let's think about this a little bit. Now, in the first place, is it hypocritical of Dr. West to call for higher taxes if he hasn't paid off his back taxes? I can't see a case for that. He's calling for the super wealthy to pay their fair share. He's not calling for his own tax rate to be reduced. And I doubt if he could be within the billionaire class or in the upper 1% that he's talking about raising taxes on. So it's not hypocritical of him. He simply has tax problems. As to that, I would say, first of all, as Dr. West said in his response to Tim Black's question, he's not a person who's highly focused on money. I've got two things to say about that. And one thing is that he has had 5 marriages, I think, maybe 4, but I think about 5, and a few children. And of course, there's a lot of money involved when you go through a divorce. Divorce lawyers and alimony and child support. Dr. West said he's paid all of his child support and he feels he's been generous about it, but the taxes are another issue. So we know he had a lot of expenses about that. And it's also clear that when he went from Harvard University to the Union Theological Seminary, he switched jobs. He took a pay cut. And the reason he switched jobs is he says he didn't say this in an interview, but I gleaned this from other sources, is that he wanted to feel closer again to a Black community of Christians from the Black community who were taking the questions of how to be a social activist within a Christian tradition, within a Black and African American Christian tradition. He wanted to be closer to that again. So he took a big pay cut. Now, right there we see he has expenses and he took a pay cut. So how he could fall behind his taxes is a little easier to comprehend. Also, I know he's had lots of income from lecturing and from his book sales. And there you can have problems with the tax authorities if you're claiming expenses against that income that are later determined to be unjustified. And that's not always a real clear, bright line, what is or is a legitimate business expense. You also have to, after you reach a certain level of income, I think, from those types of sources, self-employment essentially, you have to file quarterly tax returns. And maybe there was a failure to do that as well. So I can see that there may be questions about his tax returns that the IRS would raise, and if they determined against him that for some reason or another he violated some law or didn't pay the correct amount, that he could then have fines on top of that, and he may not have the money to pay back those taxes right away, as well as the fines in addition to them. So he'd have to be on a payment plan, and then there can be various interest rates that apply, and et cetera. So it'd be easy to fall behind. As he says, a lot of Americans have fallen into that black hole of debt to the IRS. The other thing is, now he said he's not real focused on money. And I know people like that they're not the best financial planners and not real savvy in tax filing their taxes, and they rely on other people to do that for them. I know he's relied a lot on, I think, Travis Smiley as an advisor, a publisher, and a manager for his lectures, as well as helping him have accounting services. So all these things he's placed in the hands of someone he trusts. And it may be that it was not even his fault, but that because somebody else was handling his finances and he wasn't paying sufficient attention, which would be his fault, his name is on the tax return. So it's Dr. West that would have to pay for it if somebody else made a mistake on his behalf, which leads me to a little anecdote from my own life. One of my friends from my teenage years and a little older, who isn't around anymore, he's deceased. Anyway, he had a relative, a close relative, who was in the 1960s a nationally known entertainment figure and made a lot of money during that time. At the time I met him during the 1970s, after his career had taken a hiatus, he was working in a warehouse and trying to pay back taxes to the IRS because during his career, he was so busy performing and recording and dealing with all that he trusted his managers to be paying his taxes and helping them file them correctly. And he added, this is something that's happened to a lot of performers and celebrities. They are people that are versed in the entertainment world, not necessarily in the financial world. So he spent quite a bit of time trying to pay back taxes and then getting back on his feet to manage his own career a little later on, make a return to performing. I want to add one other thing to this discussion about these accusations about owing back taxes. And that is, why is this coming up now? And how did it come to the attention of the reporter? You may have had your suspicions as well that this is orchestrated by Democratic Party insiders connected with the Democratic National Committee or the Joe Biden campaign. And I would say there's very good reasons to suspect that. For one thing, the sources quoted in the article were public records in New Jersey and California. It didn't exactly say where those public records were from. Excuse me, I'm moving my microphone a little bit. It seems to have sunken away from me. They didn't say what the sources of these public documents were, but I would guess that they're court cases such as divorce proceedings or child custody cases or something like that, where Dr. West had to reveal his finances, because your tax returns are private information and wouldn't ordinarily if you owe taxes, it wouldn't ordinarily be public record unless it appeared in some other type of court case. So can you imagine a reporter just on some kind of a hunch, like Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen would have back in the Superman show, just having a lucky hunch what to look into, that you had to check court records in states of New Jersey and California to see if there was any financial dirt on Cornel West or anything else like that? Who's got the time to do that as a journalist? No, you would have a tip from somebody else. And who would that somebody else be that would have the time to start searching for old news articles or records, or trying to brainstorm things that Dr. West might have that looks bad for him, and then try to dig up information on that? Who would have the time and the resources to do that? Well, it would be the, what do they call it? I think of it as dirty tricks, but there's another name for it. Opposition research on the part of Democrats in the Biden campaign or the Democratic National Committee. Somebody's doing opposition research and they're being paid to dig up things on Cornel West and then feed that information to journalists. Of course, it's the responsibility of the journalist to then check it out, make sure the documents are legitimate, and write a story based on what they know, try to give fair space each time. But the real sources of the documents would be somebody within the administration. So we see this as the first of dirty tricks against Dr. Cornel West, and I think there will be more with trying to attack him on various character grounds and dig up dirt on him. So be prepared for that, and to ask questions about the source of this information, not simply its accuracy or whether it's truly something that would delegitimize his chances to be a good president. We've certainly had worse presidents in recent years. All right, that's it for today. Once again, asking if you've enjoyed this show to subscribe to it, to hit that notification button, to give it a thumbs up if you can, to tell other people about it, share it with other people. It's also available in podcast version on various platforms, Political Dharma. Look for it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Nordenham1234, for giving me that little pushback on the sore loser laws. And I hope the rest of you will chime in if you've got things you'd like to say about anything I've been talking about. Don't know what I'm going to be doing on the show next week, so you have to tune in and find out then. Hope you do. Bye for now. Thanks.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus. The moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.